Pragnę Państwa bardzo pięknie przywitać w imieniu swoim. Ja się nazywam Jan Kreft. Mam przyjemność i zaszczyt reprezentować Uniwersytet Jagielloński. A dzisiejszą część obrad poprowadzę w imieniu, a także w niechcianym zastępstwie profesora Bogusława Nieremberga, o którego zdrowie zaczynamy wszyscy dbać. Także bardzo pięknie Państwa witając w tej niezwykłej sali. Jak się spojrzę na ten magiczny obraz Matejki, rozmowa z Bogiem, Kopernika, to jest kolejne miejsce, w którym przychodzi nam ściszyć głos. Otóż bardzo pięknie Państwa witając, pragnę przede wszystkim szczególnie serdecznie powitać tych gości, którzy nadają splendoru naszej konferencji. Przede wszystkim pana wiceprzewodniczącego Krajowej Rady Radiofonii i Telewizji, Witolda Grabosia. Pięknie witam. Także członków Krajowej Rady Radiofonii i Telewizji w osobie Sławomira Rogowskiego, pana ministra Sławomira Rogowskiego, także pięknie witam. Ponieważ porządek obrad Państwo znakomicie znacie, to tytułem nie tyle uzupełnienia, co zwrócenia szczególnej uwagi. Szczególnie witam serdecznie osoby, które zaszczyciły naszą konferencję, przyjeżdżając do nas z zagranicy. So, I have a great pleasure to invite, first of all, Professor Paulo Cordeiro, University of Lisbon, and Dr. Robert Soares Cardell from European Broadcasting Union Media Intelligence, and Professor Uwe Hesselbrink, Hans Bredow Institute and Hamburg University, and last but not least, Professor Guy Starkey, Sunderland University. Te osoby, gorąco proszę o brawa. Te osoby będą miały okazję zaprezentować swoje poglądy na temat rozwoju mediów w pierwszej części naszego spotkania, prowadzonego przez profesora Stanisława Jędrzejewskiego. Otrzymałem właśnie także piękną wiadomość, że jest na sali także pani senator Barbara Borys-Damięcka. Bardzo pięknie, serdecznie witam. Proszę wybaczyć to małe faux pas, ale gdańszczaninowi w gościnie występującemu w Krakowie troszkę wypada. Szanowni Państwo, ta część naszych obrad jest kilkuczęściowa. Proszę posługiwać się także programem z tą uwagą, że w drugiej części przechodzimy do Collegium Maius, do pięknej sali Librarium. Tam będzie miała miejsce ta część, która wydaje się szczególnie fascynująca, poświęcona okrągłemu stołowi mediów. Tak? To jest kontynuacja naszych pomysłów, naszych przemyśleń sprzed wielu, wielu lat, ale zapewne o tym będzie okazja. Mam teraz przyjemność zaprosić do otwarcia tej naszej części obrad dwie osoby. Z najwyższą przyjemnością zapraszam pana Jacka Ostaszewskiego, profesora Jacka Ostaszewskiego, dziekana Wydziału Zarządzania i Komunikacji Społecznej. Zapraszam pięknie.
Dzień dobry, witam Państwa w imieniu magnificencji rektora, który dzisiaj nie bierze udziału w posiedzeniu, prowadzi promocje habilitacyjne. Cieszę się, że spotykamy się. Może te gesty inauguracyjne, one oczywiście są ważne, ale ponieważ już dzisiaj jest drugi dzień obrad, to ja tylko Państwa powitam i powiem tak, że przenieśliśmy się z Collegium Maius do Collegium Novum, więc tak pomyślałem, z gotyku do neogotyku, zyskujemy przestrzeń, płótna. Trochę mi popsuło koncept informacja, że potem wracają Państwo do Collegium Maius, czyli cofamy się z powrotem w przeszłość, ale bez względu na miejsce, spotkanie i mówienie o mediach publicznych w murach uniwersytetu jest pomysłem, powiedziałbym, znakomitym, ponieważ w zaskakujący sposób, moim zdaniem, wiele nas łączy. Pomijam już medioznawstwo, zainteresowanie badawcze mediami, ale fakt bycia instytucjami publicznymi. To oczywiście nakłada na nas rozliczne obligi w postaci transparentności zachowań, dyscypliny finansów publicznych, ale przede wszystkim tego, co ukryte jest w nazwie konferencji, że jako media publiczne i szkoły publiczne pełnimy służbę społeczną. Jak z tego wywiązać się w zmieniającej rzeczywistości? 25 lat dla mediów to jest pewien moment podsumowań. Media doświadczają, powiedziałbym, permanentnego kryzysu w sensie zmiany i podejmowania licznych ryzyk w działalnościach. To samo dotyczy szkolnictwa wyższego. I myślę, że takim podstawowym dylematem obu systemów działania publicznych jest komercjalizacja, wyzwanie urynkowienia wszelkich działań i wszelkich zachowań. Jak wiadomo, dla mediów jest to tym wyznacznikiem słuchalność i oglądalność, przyciągnięcie uwagi odbiorcy, bo trzeba do kogoś konkretnego mówić i trzeba się wykazywać skutecznością informowania. Nas to w gruncie rzeczy też dotyka w postaci czegoś, co bym nazwał klientyzacją. W sytuacji, gdzie my tracimy już pozycję w relacji mistrz-uczeń, tylko występujemy w roli dostarczyciela wiedzy plus potwierdzonych certyfikatem kompetencji i zawieramy kontrakt z naszym klientem, co prowadzi zresztą do roszczeniowych postaw i często kończą się nasze kontakty zarówno dydaktyczne, jak i naukowe w salach sądowych, co kilkanaście i jeszcze lat temu byłoby nie do pomyślenia. Wracając zatem do tej służby. Tak, zresztą tak jeszcze pociągnę ten wątek, bo ta konfliktowość, tak przyszło mi do głowy, że to też jest podstawowy problem mediów. Pomyślałem sobie, że obecne wymogi prowadzenia zajęć, gdzie oczekuje się od nas atrakcyjnej formy podawczej, trochę mi przypomina problem mediów z podstawową zasadą dramatyzacji każdej informacji. Wiem, że wczoraj była o tym mowa, że zła informacja wypiera dobrą informację. To jest ta zasada, że bad news is good news i że to się lepiej sprzedaje. Sam to obserwuję w kontaktach z dziennikarzami, gdzie w momencie, gdzie nie można przedstawić sytuacji w postaci konfliktu, sporu, gdzie nie ma potencjału na dramatyzację, znika zainteresowanie, bo to się nie sprzeda. Jak sobie z tym radzić? Powiem, że ja jako nauczyciel akademicki też mam ten problem, ponieważ wykładając przedmioty teoretyczne, kiedyś od mojego pryncypała usłyszałem, że ja mam zajęcia z teorii filmu przekształcić w show. I teraz jak, operując pojęciami abstrakcyjnymi, zrobić z tego widowisko? Jest to problem, jak daleko iść w tej funkcji nastawienia na atrakcyjność, bo tak się świat zmienił. Rewolucja cyfrowa sprzyja temu. Widać to nie tylko w mediach elektronicznych, ale widać to nawet w tak, powiedziałbym, analogowej, która się przekształciła w cyfrowy obszar, fotografia, gdzie zmienia się i myślę, że to też jest problem dla mediów, gdzie profesjonaliści są wypierani przez amatorów. Łatwość dostępu do technologii i do internetu powoduje, że tradycyjny rynek znika, pojawia się nowa przestrzeń do działania i to dotyczy właściwie także obszaru mediów publicznych. Powiem tak, że ja się nawet zastanawiam, czy to są problemy, czy to są dylematy. Według mnie to jest subtelna różnica z tym, że problem jest rozwiązywalny, a dylemat ma naturę problemu filozoficznego, czyli nierozwiązywalności. Niemniej jednak trzeba na ten temat rozmawiać i myślę, że najwyższa pora, ponieważ ja nie jestem człowiekiem mediów, ale wiem, że w mediach obowiązuje zasada timingu i liczenia czasu, szanowania czasu, więc zapraszając do debaty, życząc owocnego spotkania, zapraszam pana ministra Witolda Grabosia. Proszę go o zabranie głosu.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie profesorze. Ja od 2 dni przeżywam szczególną atrakcyjność intelektualną i to jest ta dobra, szlachetna i obiecująca atrakcyjność. To a propos pana sympatycznej wypowiedzi, a poważnie, szanowni panowie profesorowie, mili goście, szanowni państwo, powinnością dzisiejszej konferencji jest namysł badawczy nad rolą, przemianami i zadaniami mediów publicznych w Polsce i na świecie. Przeczytałem to, bo jest to fragment porozumienia pomiędzy jego magnificencją, panem profesorem Wojciechem Nowakiem i przewodniczącym Krajowej Rady Radiofonii i Telewizji, panem Janem Dworakiem, którego dzisiaj nieumiejętnie próbuję zastąpić w imieniu Krajowej Rady. Tak zbiega się szczęśliwie, że naszą ustawową powinnością jest inicjowanie postępu naukowo-technicznego i kształtowanie kadr w dziedzinie radiofonii i telewizji. Ja się cieszę, że do takiej konferencji dochodzi i Uniwersytet Jagielloński w dużej mierze zechciał nas, szczególnie w tej edukacji, wyręczyć. Dziękuję za wszystko, co było. Proszę o jeszcze. Proszę państwa, 650 lat temu zrodziła się niepowtarzalna nadzieja na rozwój polskiej nauki. Niesamowite, ale to się udało. Uczelnia rozkwita. Jest niewiarygodna stałość w tej ustawicznej zmienności rzeczy. Coś niepowtarzalnego, szczególnego. 25 lat temu zrodziła się nadzieja na nową rzeczywistość w kraju. Też się udało. Wczoraj zrodziła się nadzieja na inne myślenie o mediach publicznych. Powiało nadzieją. Ja mam taką wewnętrzną pewność, że ta nadzieja przekształci się w fakty. Prawda jest taka, i powtórzę to, co mówiłem wczoraj, że możemy zgodzić się na to, że nie będzie mediów publicznych, ale taka zgoda oznaczać będzie de facto zgodę na życie w gorszym świecie. To jest element, który konstytuuje demokrację jako taką, który wyznacza standardy jakościowe, przyzwoitościowe, estetyczne, etyczne także. Myślę, że ta konferencja będzie dobrym przesłaniem dla przyszłości mediów publicznych. Dziękuję bardzo.
Szanowni Państwo, bardzo pięknie dziękuję. Jest z nami także na sali pan minister Stefan Pastuszka. Bardzo pięknie witam. Nie miałem okazji jeszcze. Są także z nami na sali prezesowie mediów publicznych, rozgłośni regionalnych. Witając ich ponownie, jak miało to miejsce w dniu wczorajszym. Bardzo się cieszę z ich obecności. Pragnę Państwa także poinformować wzorem wczorajszego dnia, że patronat nad naszą konferencją objął prezydent Rzeczpospolitej Bronisław Komorowski. To wielki zaszczyt. To wielki zaszczyt dla konferencji naukowej. Winien Państwu jestem także małą informację z prośbą o wyrozumiałość. Mianowicie w tym momencie dojeżdża na nasz budynek gość specjalny. Ta osoba, której szczególnie oczekujemy, mianowicie pani Ingrid Daltenre, dyrektor generalny European Broadcasting Union. Mam zatem taką propozycję, żebyśmy zechcieli dochować naszego reżimu czasowego i rozpocząć nasze zajęcia o godzinie 11 z malutką przerwą. Bardzo pięknie Państwa zapraszam w takim razie na chwilkę przerwy. Pracujemy, tak? Słowo się rzekło. Słowo się rzekło. Mamy zaszczyt i przyjemność przywitać w naszym gronie panią Ingrid Deltenre, dyrektor generalny European Broadcasting Union. Moja skromna rola się w tym momencie kończy. Oddaję głos panu profesorowi Stanisławowi Jędrzejewskiemu. Prowadzi nasz pierwszy panel. Zapraszam pięknie.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Proszę Państwa, mamy niezwykłą przyjemność gościć wśród nas panią Ingrid Deltenre, dyrektor generalną Europejskiej Unii Nadawców, która zechciała mimo różnych kłopotów, również rodzinnych, przyjechać tutaj na ten jeden chociaż dzień i wystąpić jako gość specjalny. I bardzo serdecznie Pani dziękuję za to, że zechciała Pani tu przyjechać i gościć u nas. Dziękuję bardzo. Bardzo dziękuję. Państwo pozwolą, że kilka słów, zanim oddam jej głos, kilka słów o niej samej. Objęła swoją funkcję dyrektora generalnego EBU w styczniu 2010 roku, ale przed objęciem tej funkcji była szefową, dyrektorem generalnym telewizji niemieckiej, szwajcarskiej, w Szwajcarii. I podczas swojej kadencji z powodzeniem wykreowała na nowo profil nadawcy publicznego. Pracowała nad wprowadzeniem Schweizer Fernsehen do internetu i na platformy mobilne i dzięki jej staraniom między innymi został uruchomiony kanał HD Swiss, również wszystkie transmisje Mistrzostw Europy w piłce nożnej w 2008 roku w wysokiej rozdzielczości zawdzięczamy jej. Przedtem kierowała jeszcze takim przedsiębiorstwem handlowym telewizji szwajcarskiej, który wówczas był wiodącym sprzedawcą telewizji szwajcarskiej. Proszę Państwa, Pani Ingrid Deltenre, you have a floor, please.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I must say I feel very honored to stand here in front of you in this fantastic building, in this fantastic room. And I really have the pleasure now to share some of the ideas, and I hope there will be afterwards also short discussion. I also feel honored to stand in front of you because I know how important this date is. It's 25 years after the first semi-democratic or semi-open elections that have taken place and were probably the culmination point of a movement that started with Solidarność and that had actually such an impact that we would call it today probably the Easter Spring. And has changed so much. And I think many people are very grateful that this movement has started here in Poland and has a lasting impact. It was also 25 years after the massacre of the Tiananmen Square, and that also shows that freedom comes at a price, and you shall never ever take this for granted, as the developments are showing today in Ukraine. Of course, we're talking about the media in this context. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about politics all the time. But looking into what happens and looking also at the performance of, for example, the Russian media at the moment, it shows you how important media are, especially in times of crisis. According to the reports we get in the European Broadcasting Union, we know, and some of the people would probably, when it's about the performance of the media in Russia, would probably rather talk about a Putin show. All media, radio, television, newspapers, playing the drums and actually repeating all over and over again the same message. It's about a fascist regime in Kiev, murdering and assassinating Russian people, There is a Holocaust going on in Ukraine, according to those media, and this Holocaust is supported by the EU and actually orchestrated by the United States. And apparently, this is quite a message that comes through. According to a poll that was done by the Levante Center, 94% of the Russian people actually get their information through television, mainly through television. It's another 21% that says, well, actually, after television, I also have discussions with my friends and with my neighbors. It's only about 12% that say, well, I'm also listening to the radio. Internet, to my big surprise, came with 10%, and newspapers with 9%. It's not a country, Russia, where you have a rich and vibrant newspaper industry. That, for me, was a surprise. And also when the people were asked, do you feel well informed in Russia? 70% say, yes, I feel very well informed. Again, when I look in how the news is staged by Russian media, and I'm a little cynic when I say that, but sometimes it reminds me of a film which is called Wag the Dog. I don't know if you have seen that movie, Wag the Dog. It's from Barry Levinson, and it's starring Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman. And if you haven't seen it, you should see it, because it is actually all about how you stage something that actually doesn't take place, and how you use the elements of show to actually make something look real and also scary and also frightening. And some of the elements we can see in the Russian media very much resemble this, let's say, tactics and techniques that are used in that movie. So if you don't know it, you really should have a watch. Well, again, let me come back. The media are important, and I think nobody knows this more than the dictators that make use of them. But of course, the media in modern democracies, as I have been growing up in one, sometimes are so easily taken for granted as well. And all of a sudden, you see we have completely other problems, especially when it comes to public service media. But once again, and then I will stop talking about Russia. Let's not forget what it means when I talk about media. And let's see and look at the difference, what it means when we talk about media in the interest of politics and media in the interest of oligarchs, but also media in the interest of citizens. And events and, let's say, developments that we can see today, and we have the proof of how it's done today, show us how important, in fact, media should be that serve the citizens and the citizens only. And yes, the internet is a force, is a strong force, is a force for democracy, but the internet is as well used by the ones striving for freedom, for peace, for, let's say, an open sharing of information, as it is used by other people. And in this respect, we talk about trolling. I'm not sure if you have ever heard that word, trolling. Using the blogs, using the comments that you can make, and actually in the view and in the mindset of, let's say, propaganda to support a certain regime. And again, this is very much visible now. So yes, the internet is a force for democracy, is definitely a force for the good, but it can also be used the other way around. So, but again, today we are talking about public service media in the interest of democracy. And now I'm trying to do something to make this, and open up my speech here, because this is going to be supported by a couple of slides. And I promise I'm not going to use too many of them. But let me first explain quickly, I can stand here as well, how this whole speech is going to look like. Here. Super, thank you. I would like to talk quickly about what is public service media, in fact. I want to discuss 2 or 3 models as they are, let's say, in a spread all over Europe. I will definitely talk about the challenges of public service media, and I'm only going to touch on the vision for media because I know that my colleague, also working for the European Broadcasting Union, Roberto Soares, is going to go more in depth with this regard. So this is going to be the bridge between the two of us. Well, what is public service media? I've talked about the media that serves the politics in my introduction. When we were discussing, let's do it in a different way. When we were discussing what is public service media within the European Broadcasting Union, and we had quite some discussions going on because we saw that we have different heritage. We come from a different point of view. We are in the European Broadcasting Union 56 countries, and it's mostly about public service media that are our members, but not only. We also have some commercial members. So within this, and 56 countries, maybe also to explain you quickly, that includes countries from North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, Libya, Jordania, Israel, goes up to Azerbaijan, Turkey, Russia, Belarus, but of course also Poland. It goes up the whole Nordic countries, the Baltic countries, Iceland. They're all members of the European Broadcasting Union. And this union sits on three pillars. We provide media services for members, and radio and television in Poland are members, and actually very active members. Andrzej Wisniewski, who I don't see in the audience yet, he is in the board of the European Broadcasting Union. So you are an active member and you contribute a lot, I can say. But the EBU contributes with media services. We buy sports rights, transmissions, we produce documentaries, but also big entertainment shows as the Eurovision Song Contest. We are a center, let's say, of research, of exchange, of learning for the members, a union that provides an intellectual, let's say, environment to discuss. But we are also, and you will hear part of this story now today, we are also the voice of public service broadcasters when it comes to defending the model, the funding, the idea of public broadcasting in Europe. And again, we know we can't take this model for granted. So when we're in this diverse union, we're talking about, well, what is actually public service media? What makes the difference? What is the difference between public service media and commercial media? We came and we saw there are many models in Europe. We are very diverse, and I think we take this also as an opportunity. But we also came to the conclusion at the end of the day, it is all about values. And these values, we strive for them. We know that we are not perfect, nobody is perfect, but we believe that in today's world, these values that you see behind me on the screen are the core values that define public service media. And not one only, but the whole set of them. So public service media is all about being independent, not just being the mouthpiece of a government, being independent also from advertisers when it comes to programming. We all know that we depend on governments when it comes to funding. We all know that we depend on governments when it comes to the framework. When I talk about independence here, we definitely talk about the editorial independence. We talk about universality. We need and we want and we must produce a program that serves the whole society, majorities, but also minorities. People with hearing disabilities, with hearing and seeing disabilities. So the services must be accessible to the whole society. We talk about diversity, meaning it is a program that reflects the cultural diversity, the creative diversity, but also the diversity of opinions and views. We talk about excellence. In the initial phase when public broadcasters were launched, radios in the 20s and the 30s, television mostly in the 60s, 70s, there was a scarcity of frequencies. And that's why public broadcasters were public and heavily regulated. There's no scarcity of frequencies anymore. Everybody can launch a television station or a radio today on the internet anyway. So when we make a distinction today, and we need to be different, then it is through excellence, through quality. And this is what normally, let's say, a commercial broadcaster can have excellent programs, but he will not serve the whole society. He will serve the society that is valuable enough to be relevant for a commercial, let's say, for an advertiser. So he serves definitely part of it, and in this part he can be very good, but he's not going to serve the whole society. And the difference here is also a commercial broadcaster at the end of the day needs to earn money, and there's nothing wrong with earning money. That's okay. We're living in a free market, so that's absolutely okay. But normally, if you want to earn money, you want to do this by investing as less as possible and to get maximum impact. And that is, again, is good. That's what you have to do if you are a commercial broadcaster. But that is not the purpose if you are a public broadcaster. It's about innovation. The fact that you are funded in the way you are, you have sort of a security when it comes to funding, should also give you the liberty and the freedom to innovate, to dare, to do some experiments. Not when we talk about news, there you should not innovate. But when it is about technology, when it is about creativity and programming, there you can take risks that a normal commercial broadcaster is not going to do. And there also you can take risks with regard to cultural programming, for example. Accountability, you use public money, you have to be transparent, you have to show and demonstrate what you do for the money and if you are efficient and what it serves for and if it is actually well invested. And by these 6 values, we believe that we, as public broadcaster, are empowering a society, that we contribute not only to information, to an informed citizenship, but also to a social cohesion within a country. And this is what we believe is the difference, because all of the 6 values actually together make the difference compared to a commercial broadcaster. Now, there are different models in Europe, and I start a little bit by the similarities. So normally public broadcasters, they all have a remit. It's sort of mentioned in the Constitution, there is a legal framework that ensures this, there's a lot that we share in common. And with the remit and the obligation and the public obligation comes also a specific funding model. And what you see here, and I hope the map is correct, it's a little wide, no, it's correct in the back. You see different funding models, and I guess you know exactly what the green spot is all about and how this country is named. What you see here is that most of the public broadcasters, and let's say, this graph shows you the main source of funding. And if you look into this picture, you see that in the dark blue, you have the countries, the regions that depend on state money. Let's say it's tax, basically tax that is paid by the citizens, of course, to the government, and it is the government and the national parliament normally, or the Ministry of Finance, that actually decides on the budget for the broadcaster, and this is very often done on an annual basis. The light blue shows you the model that we actually, as a European Broadcasting Union, would say this is our preferred model. It is a license fee, or it's a contribution by household, but it's a license fee where the citizen has a direct relation to the broadcaster. And you have to explain to the citizen why he should pay this. So this is, again, the dominating model in the light blue is license fee. Many of them also have advertising. But let's say the license fee makes maybe 70% of the revenues and the advertising roughly 30%. There is one only country in Europe, which is called Poland, where actually the broadcaster depends on advertisement money mainly. So you see, I'm not qualifying this. I myself, I was a TV director. I loved to be depending on 2 sources, advertisement and license fee, because it kept me up on my toes, and we were efficient, and we were good, and we were agile. But of course, if you depend fully on advertisement, this has an impact. At the end of the day, it has an impact on what you can actually do, and what you can afford to do, and what you cannot afford to do anymore. But no comments. It's your country and your decision. Of course, when it comes to the funding, it is not only the model of funding, but it is also the absolute amount of funding. And this is extremely difficult to compare this in Europe again. And here we have a graph where we demonstrate some funding levels. And in order to be able to do this, and by the way, all those graphics have been produced by Roberto, who sits over there. I just have to quote the source. By looking in the level of funding, we took the gross domestic product, the GDP. And we just looked which countries are in the upper third, which are in the middle, and which are in the lower third. And also you see some gray areas where no data was available. Unfortunately, we have no access to this data because our members wouldn't give those data to us. But the lower third, again, you see a couple of countries, and amongst those countries is unfortunately also Poland. But you see also the upper third, the dark blue, and the middle third. If you would do the development of those, you would see it would be probably everything a little bit in red, honestly. There is, on the long run, a problem with funding of public broadcasters. But let's say this is the situation as of today, and especially the dark blue and, of course, the light blue areas are showing some stability. And also, I think, together with this, if you would underlie the market share and reach, which I'm going to do now, you will see it might have an impact. Now, when it comes to public broadcasting, it is not only about market shares, what we sometimes say. I was talking about the value which is called universality. Universality, producing a program for everybody. And when we talk about this chart, which you see in the back, we talk about reach, which is a technical term. And this technical term says nothing else than how many in percentage of the public you have in your country do you reach at least once a week for 15 minutes that they really watch. 15 minutes, not here a minute and there a minute and there a minute, but 15 minutes together, one program. And here again you see, and I'm very happy to see that actually Poland now is not in the red anymore, and you will see even a better slide later. But you see again, very good in producing a program for the whole society. You see this in Iceland, very small community, 320,000 inhabitants, small island, easy to reach, everybody knows everybody almost. And you see that the UK, but also some Benelux are very good in this. That goes together with the number of channels, the diversity of programming, but also the offer they can afford to produce fresh. You see most of the European countries are reaching between 70 and 80% of the audience every week. Unfortunately, my own country, Switzerland, you see, is in pink, which actually is not sufficient, according to me. But you see also some red areas where only half of less of the population actually uses one of the programs, or especially television programs, of a public broadcaster. This is always a sign of mistrust. And also of program quality at the end of the day. And last but not least, and then I stop with the data, it's about market share. And here again, I know this is not so differentiated. Our threshold is you should have at least a market share of 15%. We said it's 15. It could also be 20, it could also be 10. We thought 15 is probably the level that you should have as a public broadcaster if you are relevant. And I'm extremely pleased to say that Poland is far above. And this is actually a good sign. It shows that despite the fact that there was less and less money available, they made the right selection and the right choices and still are able to reach a substantial amount of the population. This is good. And they do remarkably well compared to other countries. But here again, you see the same area. It's very much funded by the state. And not a very rich program, but also not very relevant. People don't trust. Market shares sometimes in the red, around 5 to 10%. And this is, of course, a problem. If you are so low, you will have the discussion in every country, why do we invest in public service media? The money is not wisely spent. And nobody is watching it, so we actually can turn it off. And that happened in Greece. Despite the fact that they didn't produce a deficit, actually they were breaking even. The license fee came in through the electricity bill, so they had the money, it was spent. But nevertheless, the market share went really down, and the government, for other reasons, not only for this one, actually decided also for reasons to comply to the objectives of Troika, actually closed it down. And the same is going to happen in Israel, unfortunately, where they also have a market share of maybe a little below 5%. And if you are so low in relevance, I think the question is right to ask. But you should also ask the question, why is it so low? And normally, there is a simple solution and answer to this. And this answer lies in this public service media triangle, if you want. All the broadcasters act in this triangle. You have the government, and with regard to the government, you talk about funding and you talk about editorial independence. You have the competitors, and with the competitors, normally, and I'm going to explain this, you talk about the scope of remit. Should the public broadcaster have sports on air? Should the public broadcaster have series and shows on air? Or is this something only for the commercial? That's the question you have there. And of course, funding issues come there as well. And the audience, of course, when it comes to the audience, you talk about trust. Do I trust this information that is actually presented to me? Do I trust what they say? Is this program good for me? Is it just about, I'm now saying something a little direct, just about boring cultural programs, about a folk music tradition that was relevant maybe 40 years ago? Or is this something that attracts me because it answers and inspires me with regard to questions I have today? So it's also about the creativity. So this is relevant for every broadcaster. And now what happens in this triangle? There are really disruptive forces. Governments and parliament. Some governments take public service for granted. It works. Well, actually, you know, I should do something in my campaign. Let's cut the license fee. I'm going to be popular. I need to be re-elected. Or there are governments that say, you know what, this is sort of strange what happens there. I put my nephew in this position or my neighbor in that position, and I make sure that this broadcaster is going to air what actually I want to hear them to say. Or it goes in directly, and this is something which is more delicate, I think. We have an economic crisis in Europe, and it's perfectly understandable that some governments need to make savings. And if everybody needs to make savings, why should the broadcaster not also make savings? Here the question is how you do it. If everybody makes savings, the broadcaster should make savings too. But if at the end of the day, it's only the broadcaster who has to make savings, then it is about independence. Because with less money, you're going to make a different program. And this is why we fight sometimes. We say we understand difficult times, everybody has to watch out, you have to spend less. But that goes for the military services, for the agriculture, for the schools, for the hospitals, for everybody. And if everybody has to cut down, the broadcaster should be reasonable enough to know that he should down as well. So there's one thing. Competitors. Think about the publishers. They live in a disastrous time. There's just a fundamental change going on in the print industry. And what they do is they fight. They fight for having more money, and also some commercial broadcasters get money as well, have reductions in advertisement, have reductions here and there to actually make their life better. Understandable to a certain extent, but I'm going to talk about why this is not going to be the solution, because you're actually strangling your own media production because the competition today is global. It's not the national newspaper that fights. It's a global industry that takes place, and you are weakening your own organization if you just give in. And of course, the audience. There is much more channels that you have ever had. The channels have quadrupled or even more over the last 10 years. And there is coming Netflix. I don't know if you have heard about Netflix or Spotify in the radio world. People can download films as many as they want for 10 euros a month. The broadbands are there, the cable networks are there. So there is something happening which we call is a trend from linear television to non-linear television, but you have also an increase in offer. So again, the audience has a much better choice, fantastic for the audience, great opportunity for us to produce good stuff. But of course, there is also the fact then that especially with regard to the younger audience, you have the situation that they ask themselves, well, why should I pay license fee? I'm not watching television Polska at all. I'm in the internet. So again, there is something going on, and this is a discussion you don't only have here in Poland, this discussion goes on in every country. And despite this, I'm not aware of any single country that said we don't need a strong, independent public broadcaster. That has not happened. Even in Greece, they're establishing one. Even in Israel, they're going to establish a new one. Why? Well, first of all, the technology is driving a lot of change. I have here the television. I could also have here a radio. We not only have the big television set, which is going to be the center of the family for many more years. This is what we believe. You have also other tablets. You have mobile phones. But the broadcaster, the public service remit, does not belong only to the big screen at home. It is about an offer that we make in a multimedia area, and you have to serve all the platforms because the audience serves all the platforms. It's like a bank. A bank wouldn't say, oh, I don't take these cash machines because this is not a bank. Nowadays, people want to use cash machines, so you have to support them because the people need money. In this case, the people need information, they want to be distracted, they want to know the weather and the temperature, and they want to know any other information. So your mandate is going to be fulfilled on all the platforms. Even European Commission has seen this, and every case that has been done by a publisher to actually try to limit the scope of a public broadcaster has been rejected. But the second, also very important trend is globalization. And here I think we talk about Europe, and I know there is a lot of talks about whether or not the European idea has maybe been a little bit too big, and the subsidiarity principle is not really used. But the idea to have a common market is probably the only one that is going to be relevant in the future. Because we talk about the US on the other side, we talk about China, we talk about other forces. So a certain harmonization absolutely makes sense. And even if there is no harmonization, what's going to take place and is taking place is the globalization in the media industry. And this is why we have to be very careful when it comes to the national legal and regulatory framework. Are we regulating a local problem? And are we actually helping our companies to compete with global players by regulating what we did in the past? Do we have to revise and to review what we regulate and how we regulate, looking into what's happening outside? And what you see behind me is the total turnover or revenues of public service broadcasters within the EBU, 56 countries, the ones we have the information. You see the top 12 commercial channels with 48 billion, and you see the global media, the big media, Time, Discovery, the big media, including also Google, Amazon, but also the Apple part that is dealing with media. It's about, I don't know, I'm not good in calculating, 30 times bigger than all public service broadcasters in our association together. And this we should keep in mind, because they are actually buying, and also in Poland, they are buying actually your national channels. So when you want to have a strong national channel that actually still invests in national production, in cultural creativity, you will need to have a good public broadcast, because the commercial one is not going to do this if it's not necessary. But by having a strong public broadcaster, you will have an impact on the whole media environment. Because if the public broadcaster is strong, the commercial broadcaster need to be better as well, because the audience expectation is high. And this impact of having a good, independent, high-quality public broadcaster will raise the quality of the overall production in your country. You should not underestimate this impact. Now, I don't want to prolong too much. I have a couple of slides, if that's okay. Yes. Well, I talked about the internet. I'm not going to quote what's written behind me, but I just want you, if you have once time and you don't know it, there is a manifesto which is called Clue Train Manifesto. It has been written in 1999. It's actually quite old in the internet world anyway. But when you read it now, a couple of years later, you will understand exactly what these kind of young people meant when they were writing it. They were 25, 29 years old at that time. The internet is not a medium, is not a product. You just can't close it down as it maybe has been tried in Turkey. The internet is an enabling force that brings people together, and they share, and they use it for different purposes. And this has an impact on how a public broadcaster, we believe, how a public broadcaster need to act in the future. And you will definitely hear more about that from Roberto. But in a networked society, I think the public broadcaster, I wouldn't say he is at risk. He's definitely not at risk, but he needs to be careful on how he's going to move on. And I think how he's going to move on depends a lot if he is ready to transform himself, to get down from his big towers and actually connect better with the audience and discuss better with the audience and share more with the audience, become less centralized eventually in certain areas and involve the audience more if you really want to earn and be named a public broadcaster. Now, if you want to do this and you want to stay successful, it's going, as it was in the past, it is always about content. It is at the end of the day, it's about good programs, about good content, about good ideas, about innovative ideas, about relevant ideas on all platforms. This is not going to change, because many of you, as I, when I've worked hard, I go home, I want to have some information, not necessarily at the official times, but then I also want to be distracted. This is not going to change. But the way we are going to produce this and how we find the ideas and how we involve partners eventually also by working together, this is definitely going to change. Now, again, and I'm coming now almost to the end, as a union again, we had a big project launched because we were asking ourselves, well, okay, well, what is our future then? And this project was called Vision 2020. What should we do to really stay in such a connected society indispensable? Because if you just go on like this, there is an erosion. If we just go on like this, we will all be smaller and less relevant in the future. So which path should we go? Should we become a public broadcaster that serves news and cultural needs only? Many of the commercial broadcasters would love us to do. Unfortunately, we would be rather less relevant. And as a politician, you wouldn't like especially to go to such a broadcaster to give an interview because you know exactly that nobody is watching. But if you go the other way, what do we have to do to actually find our quality and make it distinctive and be distinctive in the future and be better? It's not so easy, especially not if you don't have growing revenues. These answers and strategic recommendations were actually worked together by a little more than 200 people. I'm not going to go into detail because you will hear a little bit afterwards, but what you can do is you can download an application, the ones who have an app. It's a free application, just download it, go under Vision 2020 and you will find the application. And there you will see the recommendations that have been worked on. I see some apps already being opened, fantastic. There you will find the recommendations, you will case studies, you will also find some trends and developments. Look at the apps and look at the case studies and at the recommendations. And this is sort of the direction we think that public broadcasters should take. And amongst others, there is definitely, and it sounds almost banal, but understand your audience better. It's a simple thing, but if you really want to go and dig deep in it, it's not so simple. Your audience is using tablets now. You have a lot more information available. It's using mobile phones, it's using television, it's using radio. What do you know about your audience, how they use it, and what is the purpose they use it for, and how attractive is what you really do? So go in this direction, invest much more in understanding your audience, because at the end of the day, you have to serve an audience and nobody else. That's one of the other is definitely if you don't have enough, not always more money, you have to set priorities. What do you want to be good at? And where do you think I'm average? Where you're average or even bad, do it even less. But invest in some good, big moments, in some surprisingly big and creative moments that make a difference and where you actually really contribute to something special. Those kind of recommendations you will find in these applications. What we also share, and this is my last slide, we believe, and I can say, and that goes for the Polish radio as for the Polish television, if we really want to be relevant in 5 years from now, if we really want to stay maybe as relevant as we are today, if you really want to stay everything as it is, we must probably change everything. This is quite a famous quote. You will also find it in a famous movie. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That?
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you very much.
No
Thank you.
questions?
No,
Okay.
after the panel.
Okay.
Bardzo dziękuję za to bardzo inspirujące wystąpienie. Ja myślę, że ono jest też świetnym wprowadzeniem do panelu, który będę miał przyjemność prowadzić, ale zanim poproszę swoich przyjaciół z Portugalii, Wielkiej Brytanii i Niemiec, badaczy mediów, wytrawnych badaczy mediów, dodam, i to chciałbym prosić Roberto Suareza Candela, który jest szefem Media Intelligence Europejskiej Unii Radiowo-Telewizyjnej, o przedstawienie tego dokumentu, który nosi nazwę Vision 2020. Myślę, że ten dokument stanowi doskonałą pomoc dla nadawców publicznych, którzy poszukują jakby nowego paradygmatu działania. To już nie wystarczy tylko samo myślenie o przyszłości, tak jak wspomniał o tym pan minister Graboś, ale również zupełnie innego działania. No i rozstrzygnięć zasadniczych, w którym kierunku mamy podążać, jaki jest sens istnienia mediów publicznych, jaką strategię rozwoju te media, zarówno radio, jak i telewizja powinny przybierać. Także teraz bym prosił Roberto, a potem moich kolegów, no a potem będzie czas na pytania do wszystkich, również do pani dyrektor generalnej. Jeszcze raz chciałbym bardzo serdecznie podziękować pani za to bardzo inspirujące, doskonałe wprowadzenie do panelu. Roberto, you have a floor.
Sorry. We'll take it later. Okay. Hello, good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. For us, for the EBU, it's a pleasure to be able to share the results of the work that we have been carrying out for more than a year. And this is falling. Sorry. Well, I'll leave it there. Sorry. I use this one. So today in this presentation, I'm going to share with you some of the results of this Vision 2020 project that we carry out at EBU, and I'm going to talk about the main challenges that our members, that your public service media are facing in the current communication ecosystem. As Mrs. Terre said, at EBU, we thought it was necessary to foresee how the media environment is evolving, how the market is going to be in the 2020, to start to work from now on the change that our organizations need to face to adapt their activities, to adapt their products and their performance, to continue to be indispensable for the citizens. As we all know, the citizens have access to more and more and more media offers, and the question is, why are they going to continue to trust us, to use our services? And if they don't do so, the politicians will have the perfect argument to close down our stations, our TV channels. So the process was complex, and the result that you can see on the screen, the main result was 10 recommendations that we are addressing to our members to guide the way they should change. They are recommendations in the field of content, they are recommendations about the audiences and the relationship with the stakeholders, and they are recommendations about the organizations, about how they should change internally. We're not going to discuss all these recommendations and their implications because we will need the entire day. What we are going to talk is what are the changes we have seen in the media that have brought us to give these recommendations. These recommendations, as you might see, they are also quite broad, and that's because, as it was pointed before, our membership, 72 members in 56 countries, is very diverse. So finding a magic solution that fits all of them, it's very difficult, if not impossible. So we see this recommendation as a toolbox that everybody can use, and where you can go and pick up advice, pick up best practices. That's what you are going to find in the report. And you can use them to plan your change, the plan you really need to do in the next years. So I would like, we have talked before about what is public service media. I would like to change a bit this question. This is how we live today. Well, basically nobody has this at home, but this wants to represent the big offer, the wild ecosystem we're exposed to. So my question here, and I think this is a good context because there are many academics as also people involved in politics, is what is public service in the field of media? And please notice, I'm not asking you what is public service media, but how we can apply the concept of public service to the media. That makes a difference. This has been a discussion that has gone for many years, and we haven't found a solution. Maybe there is a unique solution. And we have discussed about what kind of content we can provide, how it should be funded, what's the structure of the organization that should provide this content, what's the acceptable level of political interference, how to bring these institutions accountable. And the problem is that when you have this big diversity in Europe, as I said before, finding unique answers is very difficult. So the question is, let's go one step further. Let's not talk about public service media content. Let's not talk about the institutions. But again, what is public service in the field of media? And if you will talk to someone that is not involved in that, someone from another planet, what you could say, public service media, in fact, is a normative construction. It's something that law, regulation is defining based on the potential good things and the potential bad things that media can result in. Because of these potential results, we set rules, we set a framework. To set these rules and this framework, our decisions, or the decisions of those involved, are ideological. They are based on values. And therefore, it's a difficult process of negotiation, because when you are convinced that something is good, why are you going to give in to something that you think is bad? Is it good that we are providing entertainment? Some people might say yes, some people might say no. Who is right? It's very difficult. So in the end, it's a result of a complex bargaining process. So when we talk about public service media, we are talking about a construction that is highly complex and cannot be defined with a scientific formula that cannot have just one solution. It's about setting together values, objectives, and social functions. This is the program that the law, the regulations, the politicians, the society think for public service media. It's about those values that have been commented. It's about what we want to achieve. We want to have universal service so everybody is well informed. We want to promote culture that commercial broadcasters might not do because it's not profitable, and it's in the legitimate position not to do that. It's about social cohesion. It's about boosting the national market, because nobody's going to do it if you don't do it at home. But of course, all this to us makes sense. And again, it's so highly complicated, and you don't have a final solution, that at EBU, as Mrs. Alterren pointed out, what we have done is talking about these values, and I'm not going to, because she has already explained, this declaration of values that we think are the basis for providing public service media in a way that it empowers the society. But if you will go outside to your students, to the normal people on the street, and you will ask them, what is public service media? I don't think they will have a clear answer. What will they do? If they have the cell phone, they will go to Google and they will type that. And what's the first image Google is giving you when you ask what is public service media? This. And it's true, you can do the test. This is the first image that appears. For me, it was a revelation, because this is public service media. It's bringing people together to share moments, to share experiences, to bring them what they can enjoy as a community. At least part of the concept is about that. And here we see a very basic representation. The problem is that today our ecosystem, our lives have become so complex that sometimes we forget about the basics. So in the past, as I said, it was very easy. There was 1, 2 channels, 1, 2 radios. Actually, public service media had the monopoly. They were the only providers, so everybody was happy or not, but at least the public service media were very happy. It was easy. We send our product is consumed. Today, things have changed. We live in a multi-screen ecosystem This increases competition, this increases complexity, and this is changing the way people are consuming media. It's not anymore those 50 people in front of one screen sharing a moment, sharing an experience. We are going to that scenario where people are sitting next to other, consuming different things in different screens. So how can we react to that, or what are the consequences? Something we were analyzing in Vision 2020, and that's very important because, as Mrs. Terra, you need to know your audiences. What is happening in the society today? Societies are fragmenting. What does it mean? It means that people are living in smaller households. It's not families with 5, 6 members anymore. In some countries, in some cities, up to 40% of people live in one individual household. I think in Hamburg, where I was living before, it's about 40% of households are individual households. We live in a more diverse society in terms of the origin and the background and the geographical or cultural background of people. And also we continue to see that there is a migration from urban areas to, from rural areas to urban areas. But what are we going to do? Are we going to forget about the people that live in the countryside? Of course not. We are experiencing a moment of crisis in Europe where people have stopped to believe. They have to stop to believe in religion, they are stopping to believe in the institutions, in everything that was for sure in the past. The subsequent economic crisis, the political corruption that we see and that the media shows us, and the availability of other sources, of other screens, are changing the way people trust institutions, and we see how new agents like Google, like Apple, these big operators, from some people have become really, really trustful sources, and we should worry about. We have a citizenship that more and more is not looking up to the institutions, but down to the screens, and we need to acknowledge that. We are living in societies where there is a technological fragmentation still. I don't know if you can see it very well here, but in Europe today, 35% of households have access to broadband. It's expected that 55% will have access to broadband in 2020, but there are still big differences between Western and Central and Eastern Europe. And what we see also is that if you increase broadband, what happens is a direct correlation how people are changing their patterns in consuming media. And what we see is that when today 90%, in 2006, 90% of people were passive, the big changes we have experienced in the last 5 years, 6 years, have resulted in that more people are active, but at the same time, more fragmentation. So this comes also, sorry for all this data, but I want to impact you with the pictures. This you can see here, the evolution of the number of IP-connected devices. And by 2020, it's expected that in Europe, 2 billion connected devices are operative. This means an average of 8 devices per household. Again, screens are taking over. Consequences, sometimes not as dramatic as it's been said. And here what we can see is that yes, people are consuming more on-demand TV, but not as many are proclaiming today. People still rely in linear TV, in the channels that have been watching in the past. So what I must say is that there is still hope, and not only hope, there is space for public service media evolving and adapting to be there and to continue to be the trusted source it has been until now. The result is that today we live in societies that are not as homogeneous as in the past. Social groups have split. People find through the internet new ways to collaborate, to associate, to share stories, to share experiences, to share interests, and people are using media in a very diverse way. And if we don't acknowledge that, and if we don't adapt ourselves to this reality, then there is no hope and there are no chances. So now is the time for action. Technological innovation has brought also more competition. The TV screen is not anymore the TV screen. It's a portal, an access point to many other services. So we need to fight so our content is visible, is findable, is relevant on the screen. But not only that screen, we also have many other screens. As said, it's a battle for the attention of the people. How are we going to do that? Then it's not only against the commercial broadcasters. Actually, today we are seeing that in many cases, commercial broadcasters and public service media need to ally in national context to battle against these international operators that come from other sectors, not necessarily from radio or from TV, but they are offering content that we used to offer. And finally, what you can see here, and it was said also before, is a map of the audience that in each country, the 4 leading groups in Europe are reaching. So what we see is an increasing level of concentration. And it will be through different brands. But when you track the ownership of those brands, what you see is that competition is decreasing and concentration is increasing. And this makes public service media more indispensable than ever. Again, all this discussion, all these topics, I would say is quite technical, we all understand, but how are we going to bring this to the citizens so they understand, they buy in, and they consume? And I would say it's not about buying in, it's about they trust us, they see us as necessary, and they consume what we offer. Well, there are many issues. I'm not going to talk about the definition, as I said, it's a rather complex topic and it's not the day for that, but I'm going to give some hints of what we saw in Vision 2020 about other issues. Funding. What you can see in the graphic is the evolution of 55 EBU members during the last years. And you can see the impact of the crisis and how budgets were reduced. And after the crisis, it seems we have been recovering. And in 2012, 53 members, because there were some mergers, 53 members of the EBU in 2012 reached an income of 33 billion euros. You may say, well, it doesn't look bad for you. Let's look at this from another perspective. Yes, there was an increase of 1.3, you see the absolute values. But then if you analyze, and sorry for the economic approach, but it's very simple, I promise. But if you analyze the effect of the inflation and you remove it, actually what we see is that despite we have been earning more money, that money doesn't value the same. And at the moment, we have minus 9.8% less resources than in 2007. So how are we going to make it? We are supposed to do more with less. And here what you see in this map is the evolution of this, of the level of funding. And again, since we are in Poland, well, in Poland the situation has not been good. So some reaction is necessary. But this slide, I like it very much. And here what you see in red is the evolution of the top 12 broadcasting groups in Europe versus, in blue, the evolution of these 53 EBU organizations. 12, 53, keep that number in mind. And let's zoom in to 2011-2012. What you see in 2012 is that these top 12 commercial broadcasting groups are making 41% more than 53 public service media organizations. Then they say we are distorters of the market. I don't think that's very true. And what you see is that increase has been growing. This difference has been growing during the years. But we should talk also, and in Vision 2020 we devote quite a lot of time, to the structure and performance of our organizations. Because we cannot claim, yes, the environment is very bad, everybody's against us. We cannot have this attitude. And we know that the change starts by changing ourselves. And this means changes in our structures, in the organization. In some cases, our members have difficulties because they need to shape the way they are organized. And because the media products are changing, the way they organize their workforce, the way they organize their working processes needs to be updated. At EBU, we are trying to help them. We have courses for the employees. We provide knowledge. We provide advice. But still, there's a long way to go. Of course, the managerial culture needs to change. If managers are not convinced, then nothing will change. And something that was discussed also in Vision 2020 was, at this moment, the most brilliant people coming out of universities, do they want to work for us or not? Or do they want to go to work for Google or for Amazon or for whoever? And sometimes it's not a question of money. Of course, you want to make a good salary, but sometimes it's about how a company, how a working environment is inspiring you and is rewarding you every day with what you do. So yes, we cannot match maybe the salaries they're offering, but if we change our organizations, maybe we will be more able to capture the talent that there are in our societies. There's the need to change the distribution strategies. I think I don't need to explain so much about that. It's not anymore about TV and radio. It's about having a multi-platform, a multi-device approach. And the objective is to achieve a coherent and seamless experience to the users. In the end, it's our children, it's our grandmas in front of the TV or any device, and they don't care about all the value chain, but they validate those efforts that have been put into the value chain. So we need to be aware of that. And again, when we change our structures, our way of working, we should not forget that today, in this multimedia environment, there are many other organizations out there that are producing content, in many cases audiovisual too, and we should be ready to partner with them, with libraries, even with hospitals, because public service media have the tradition, have the knowledge, and they are in the right position to be the amplifier for many others producing content. So we don't need to do everything, and actually we can be the excellence partner for many others. It's about innovation. Vision 2020 innovation was a big issue. If you have a historical analysis, and when I was at university before I joined the ABU, we did a project, and we found out that most of the technological innovations have been always brought into the market by public service media. Because public service media, since it's not about economic profitability, they can take the risk of testing an error, testing another thing. And in many cases, the market players, the commercial broadcasters, once public service media has introduced something into the market, then they have joined and they have made the revenue. Today, it's not only about bringing innovation to the market, it's also about following the audiences. Because innovation is so fast and everybody is innovating. And again, the users themselves, in the way they consume media, in the way they curate content, in the way they share, they are innovating. They are bringing to the marketplace new practices that we need to acknowledge, that we need to study, that we need to observe, and we need to adapt. Because if we don't follow the audience, we are going to be irrelevant. At the same time, this opens a debate to what extent you should contribute to the business that other platforms are setting with your content. And this is not a difficult issue to tackle. Understanding your audiences. This is recommendation number one. And when I was in academia, was also my recommendation number one when doing research about public service media. Because I have the impression people don't know enough about public service media and we don't communicate maybe well enough. So we need to listen, to engage, and involve our audiences to understand what are their needs, to tell them what we do, and to ask them and to invite them and to get them to participate. So in the end, I was talking about public service media being a normative construction this is not going to change, but this means nothing to the people. To the people, what could mean something is that public service media becomes a society construction, that they feel public service media as something that is theirs, something they can participate, something they can influence. Because otherwise, if there is no this communion, it's not going to work. And how you do that? It's about communication. This was a debate last night in the dinner. And I said, people don't know what public service is. And I was asked, so what scientific evidence you have? And I said, I don't need scientific evidence. I just go to the street and I ask people. And for many years, because I had to explain what was my job, doing research about public service media, and people asked me, what is that? And then I was saying, oh, you know you channels this BBC or IDE and ZDF or TVP? Ah, yes, this is public service media. And what does it mean? And then you start to talk about values and people get lost. So how are we going to communicate? People don't understand what we do. And who is defining the agenda of the debate about public service media? At EBU, we do big efforts to set an agenda, to influence relevant stakeholders, to bring relevant topics to the public opinion. But of course, we need the partnership of our members, and we need that this is happening at national level. By working only on international level is not enough. And branding and marketing are okay tactics and necessary, but it's not enough, because it's about communicating. It's about saying to normal people in normal words, what is public service media about? It's about making them understand it. Because there are three things that are important. First of all, people need to be aware. They need to know that we exist. But then they need to understand. If they don't understand, they are not going to do the third step. And the third step is action. And what actions do we want from people? We want them to pay the license fee. We want them to consume our channels. We want them to recommend our content. But if they don't understand that we are there for them, and why, and what's the difference with other media sources, they're not going to do all this. So to me, all the other changes we have been talking about, in the end, the filter is communication. Because otherwise we can go to this situation. And this situation, what we see here is a bunker, that is public service media, with all the public service media people, including you. We are there, we are saying how great we are, it's fantastic, and we are so necessary. But look at the ship. The ship is the audience. The ship with the flag of Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and they're saying, bye-bye, we don't need your things. Someone within the bunker is saying, what are the windows? We need to look outside and to understand the people. Another message from Vision 2020 is disrupt yourself before someone else does. This means that 8 years ago, nobody will imagine how important Facebook will be and how Facebook has been the agenda setter for young people. They don't go to our websites or to the newspapers to know the news of the day. They just get recommendations from their friends, and then they go there. You need to foresee this. You need to have people in public service media organizations that are free enough to challenge everything you are doing. And you need, and you can, because you don't have, you need to keep your budget under control, but you don't have to produce economic profitability. You need to innovate. Otherwise, what is very easy to happen is that you get this red tornado that is a negative spiral. And this is happening in many places where political interference, with lack of funding, blah, 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 all these things are happening one after the other. And then people are questioning why public service should be there. We don't have the social support, we won't have the political support. At EBU, with Vision 2020, and with many other actions, what we are doing is trying to reverse this action into a positive spiral. And when you have good programs, when you have good ratings, when you create a relationship of trust with the audience, you create a positive movement, and then you achieve, and that's what we hope, strong public service media companies that are perceived as indispensable, the same way that hospitals are perceived as indispensable, as schools are perceived as indispensable. Today, if you think after sleeping and after working, the activity we invest the highest amount of time is consuming media. So why nobody cares, or now why nobody's raising the voice among the citizens when someone is trying to close down a public service media channel? We need to reverse that tendency. In the end, the conclusion of Vision 2020 is that public service media need to change from being just a broadcaster, a company providing content, to become a cultural artifact, a point of reference for the audience that knows that we'll find content that can trust, as a guide, as a curator. This is the picture that summarizes a bit all these recommendations. And you can find, as Mrs. Del Torre said, an app and the report open for you all to check under this address, and we are happy to receive, of course, feedback from academia or politicians, because this is a living process. It doesn't end with this process. And my unit, the Media Intelligence Service, is very much involved in continuing with the research that is necessary to provide our members with new ideas that help them to adapt to the changing times we are living. Thank you very much.